I see this all the time, especially in the real estate space. Have investors that go through the training, they go through a course, they're going to real estate clubs, they're getting all this knowledge, but knowledge is not going to be that factor that pushes you out the door, right? It's not going to be knowledge, it's going to be action. There's so much bad knowledge and information being peddled out there at the cost of investors. So there are 5 categories of investing that I'm a big proponent of. And the very first category, and most important category, which very few people ever give any consideration to, is
what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Abundant Journey podcast. As always, I'm your host, Nick James, with Nick Offenkamp, and we got a special guest lined up today, Edwin Epperson, but he's not the first or the second, but the third. So thank you, Edwin, for hanging out with us. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. Thank you guys for having me on the podcast.
Oh, 100%. So recently, you and I got connected with another guest we had on. And so our audience who are regular listeners, Mark Wadlington introduced us, and he's just got an amazing story. But he said, hey, I'm going to bring my buddies along and get some of my buddies on the Abundant Journey podcast too. So one, Mark, if you're listening, thank you. But Edwin, man, again, it's great to meet you. Great to be hanging out with you today. Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you are, and what life looks like for you today.
Absolutely. Nick, thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm excited to be here. It's always great to talk about our journeys in business, life, and in faith, and how it all works together for the greater good, if you will. Where I'm at now, so my wife and I currently live in Tampa, Florida. I manage a private investment fund, so we are invested both in debt and equity within the fund. It's a customizable fund, so it's a little bit unique in the space of fund offerings. I am married to a Colombiana, beautiful woman from Colombia. I met her while I was in the military and hit her over the head with the stick and drug her back here. No, I'm joking. But yeah, she is a truly blessing to myself and to the business. I mean, she is just an incredible spouse, a gift from God. I have 2 boys that live with their mom up in Georgia, and that's a whole story in and of itself, which I'm sure we'll dive into today. But yeah, that's growing the business. We're looking at a lot of things that are happening in the real estate space. I think that there will be a lot of opportunities for those that are willing to put their head down and work through what's coming in the next couple of years. So yeah, I'm excited to get into all manners of topics of discussion today.
Yeah.
Yeah, love it. For some of our listeners, we've had a lot of real estate folks on. We've had a handful of lenders on. I don't know that we've had too many fund managers. And so for somebody who's unfamiliar, what is a fund? How would you define kind of what that is and the primary benefit that you bring to real estate
I would
investors?
say, and forgive me if I stepped on you, Nick.
No, not at all.
I would say that the difference is, so I'm huge on education. I believe in educating investors. Investors in today's world are bombarded with all types of opportunities, if you will. So I believe education is the foundation for making someone sophisticated in their investment decisions, how they analyze risk, how they analyze opportunities. And so there are 5 categories of investing that I'm a big proponent of. And the very first category, and most important category, which very few people ever give any consideration to, is which side of the capital stack they are investing in. And there's only 2 sides of the capital stack. You are either investing your capital into equity or into debt. So there's only those 2 sides of the capital stack. Then underneath the capital stack, you have 3 primary markets. You have your paper asset market, which would include stocks, anything on the stock market, any stock market, and now crypto. Well, I would consider crypto in the paper category, if you will. Then you have your hard tangible asset market. So those are all, real estate obviously is one of them, but that it could also include collectibles, gold, silver, anything that is even vehicles and planes, trains, and automobiles, right? Then you have your third market, which is your business market. And there are specific, nuances to each one of those markets, but underneath each one of those markets, then you have your assets. And typically, well, for instance, because I'm in the real estate space, people will say, well, are you invested in commercial, multifamily, or a single family? So those would be your primary asset classes. However, within each asset class, there are a lot of sub assets. So you have your single family, you have duplex, quadplex, triplex, you have condos, townhouses, maybe mobile homes. In the commercial side, you have office, light industrial, heavy industrial, you have raw land. I mean, the list goes on, right? Multifamily, typically multifamily are apartment units, which are 5 residential units or more. You would also classify possibly mobile home parks within that multifamily or sub asset class. And then underneath the sub assets, you have your strategies. And unfortunately, most people, they go to a training, a course, a seminar, and they are taught the strategy as it pertains to a particular sub asset class. But very rarely does anyone talk about the actual markets, and even less rarely, or even more rarely, does anyone even talk about the capital stack, debt or equity investing. So that's number one. That's my first focus. Is I want to educate people at the high level and then work themselves down instead of reverse. Everybody works from the bottom, which is the most. It actually has very little to do with your success in your investment strategy and diversification. Instead, I go from the top down. So as far as funds go, you have 2 primary ways that people invest when they are wanting to invest in a group or leveraging other people's knowledge, time, and experience. So historically, a fund would be categorized as a debt fund. You are investing in a debt fund, and typically it's a blind pool fund, which means the fund manager goes out, raises capital. I have my PPM, a private placement memorandum, that describes what we are investing in, how we are analyzing our risk, how we are mitigating our risk. But then at the end of the day, the investor says, okay, Ed, here's my money, manage it well, right? And then it's really up to the fund manager to make all the decisions. And at that point, the investor is sort of along for the ride, right? On the other side, you have syndications, which are people that go out, they file with the SEC, which a fund should be filed with the SEC, and there's ways to confirm that. But the syndicator goes out, files with the SEC to legally raise capital to actually go out and purchase. So most syndications and funds they're simply a colloquial term to raise capital. And how do you raise capital? And then really what that capital is being used as, how is it being deployed in debt or equity? And so that would be a very high level overview of the differences between a fund and a syndication, but primarily a fund normally is in debt, and it's typically structured as a blind pool fund.
It's an immensely helpful explanation. I really appreciate the breakdown there. And also, I mean, definitely a high level of trust then that you're cultivating with your clients and investors that are going into the fund. I mean, I can see the value of the education, but it sounds like as a fund manager, being given a lot more autonomy and trust with your investors' money than even like a syndication deal, which generally is highly specific to a specific property or something like that. Which is pretty amazing. I am curious, just kind of getting now into your story. How did you find yourself becoming a fund manager? Was this your 5-year-old dream and vision for life, and you've just finally realized it, or
Yeah, I was in the crib, drawing on the wall like all the risk mitigation analysis. Right. Yeah, my story is probably unique. So, and I struggle a lot. I'm sure some of your listeners are in the running businesses, they're entrepreneurs. And I would say that anybody that especially steps into the entrepreneurial space, they're taking that risk of saying, I have a vision, I have a dream of what I want to become or what I want to offer to society, to the people around me. There is always this underlying imposter syndrome. There's always this fear of, am I smart enough? Do I know enough? Do I have enough experience? Like all these things can come flooding in, and in my opinion, can be one of the greatest hurdles to building a successful business is overcoming that imposter syndrome. I really struggled with that because I was not good at I was not good in the educational sphere. I struggled all the way through high school. I was a C- D+ student. I did not fit in the mold of sitting in a classroom, having somebody lecture me and being able to retain that information. The way that I learn is through my hands, by actually doing something. So I did very poorly in high school. I graduated by the grace of God in 1999. And I tried college because, of course, that's what everybody says. Go to college, get a degree, get a high paying job, work your way up the corporate ladder, and then you'll be able to retire and sell off into the sunset. So I took an English 101 class at a local community college because my father said, I am not paying for you to go to college because you clearly proved that you do not have the ability to do well. And I said, okay, I respect that. So I was working 2 full-time jobs actually at the time. At UPS, I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, worked at a UPS as loading the planes. And then during my day, I would work at a distribution plant on Greenbelt Parkway. And so I wanted to go to college. I ended up bowing out of the UPS job, and I kept the distribution job so that I could go to college. So I went to English 101. I was like, okay, I'll get some of these basic courses out. That first semester was absolutely miserable. I was reminded of how horrible I hated formal education. And so after that, I think I won't even say I graduated. I passed that semester with a C minus, and I was like, yeah, this is not for me. I'm not going to waste my money either.
Yeah.
So 9/11 happened. And I, like many Americans at the time, I became very patriotic, and so I joined the military. I had dreams of going into special operations, but I was bamboozled by my recruiter. And he said, oh, yeah, if you sign here, then after basic, you'll have Rangers, you'll have Green Berets, everybody will come to the basic training graduation, and you just raise your hand and say you want to volunteer. And I said, oh, that's awesome. So graduation comes. I excelled, by the way, in basic. I really found my groove, if you will. And then graduation happens, and I'm like, where are the special ops? Nobody was coming. Nobody was asking a graduate, hey, do you want to come join special ops? So I was like, I just got bamboozled. And then in the world of, so I was an infantryman. I was a bullet stopper. I mean, a knuckle dragger. You have all types of names for us, but I was an infantryman, and I joined because I wanted to fight. I wanted to fight. I wanted to defend our country as well as go after those that had attacked our country. And so here I am. And in the world of the infantry, there are specific units that have much more prestige, and then other units that don't. And now this is just, I mean, at the grand scheme of things, if you join the military, I mean, it's a fantastic way to serve your country. And it doesn't matter if you are a toe tag person in the morgue, all the way to a special operator right on the front lines conducting black ops. It doesn't matter. Everybody in between has, if they're served, then they are serving a purpose, and they are contributing to the overall security and success of our nation. So, but that didn't stop. Like I wanted, during basic at the graduation, the reading off orders. So, man, I heard some of my buddies, they were getting orders to Vicenza, Italy. I was like, oh man, the 183rd. I was like, yes, I want to go to Italy. And then the others were getting orders to Hawaii. I was like, yes, who wants to go? I would love to go to Hawaii, right? We had people going to Korea, which everybody was like, Korea. But I was like, it's a foreign country. That's awesome. Yeah. So basic training happened for me at Fort Benning, Georgia, which I now think is renamed Fort Moore, I believe. And sure enough, I got stuck right there in Fort Benning, Georgia, 3rd Infantry Division, 3rd Brigade. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. So I got stuck. I got stuck with a mechanized unit. And I was like, man, this is ridiculous. The very first day that I showed up to my unit, my squad leader was a staff sergeant, and he had just gone to Special Forces selection. And within 1 week after I got on, was onboarding and getting used to military life, he pulled me aside. He said, Ed, you look like you've got a lot of potential. I want to encourage you to we call it crossing the fence. Cross the fence, go to special operations. And he gave me his long tab, which is what you call the Special Forces tab. And he said, keep this in your cap and have this a dream. I would encourage you to go that route. So I was like, okay, that's cool. And then so that was October of 2002, November of 2002, we get told that, hey, everybody needs to prepare. You may not get a Christmas break. We're all deploying to Kuwait. Be on standby. And I was like, oh man, of course, the whole world knew, like everything was moving with Saddam Hussein. The pieces were starting to put into place. So it was pretty well known that there could be conflict on the horizon. And so we deployed to Kuwait in January of 2003. We jumped around a couple of camps. If any of your listeners were in the military at that time, then I'm sure they've heard like Camp New York, Camp Philadelphia. So we were jumping around these camps, and every camp inched us closer to the border. And we were conducting training for World War II style conflicts. So there were trench clearing operations. We were training in case we got gas, because the expectation was Saddam had chemical weapons and he would use them. So there was just this unbelievable, just this expectation of, man, all, excuse the language, but all hell could break loose. And sure enough, March 20th at 11 p.m., we started our border crossing. And so we were lined up on the border of Kuwait and Iraq. And at like 12 in the morning, 1 in the morning, we got alerted. This Humvee's flying down Route 1, and the guy was on the back saying, gas, gas. He's doing the universal hand sound. And that's like, what we were trained for. And we watched videos. I mean, they were sure to inundate us with the absolute importance of, if there's gas or any type of chemical warfare, you have like 6 seconds to get on your mask, your suit. You have 6 seconds to get on your mask, and then like 30 seconds to get on your suit. That gives you the highest chance of survival. And like, you think you're prepared for that, but when it actually happens is the most, oh man, it was crazy. And so finally get your mask on and you're like, man, where are the explosions? And we looked up and we saw the Scuds heading into Kuwait, and they were like, load up into the Bradley. So we were in Bradley fighting vehicles. We loaded into the ramp, and that started a 36-hour nonstop sprint from Kuwait all the way to Najaf, Iraq. And then from Najaf, we went from Najaf, Al Yasalim, Samara, all the way to Baghdad. We were responsible for securing the northern bridges outside of Baghdad. And my very first, I had my cherry popped. And when we were securing, I want to say the very first target before we got to the first city which was Najaf, we secured which became known as the George Bush International Airfield, something like that. And that was our first. My cherry was popped. My first engagement, first time firing a rifle, first time. Actually, I wasn't had the rifle. I was a big guy, so they're like, "Hey, you got the machine gun." So I had the machine gun. I had the M249, and man, it was a wild ride. And so for the next 13 years, I served. So I got out in October 2015, and so during that time, 8 years in the regular infantry, 4 years with 3rd Infantry Division out of Fort Benning, and then I re-enlisted, went up to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, the whole reason I re-enlisted because it was the 101st Screaming Eagles. And historically, I was looking back in World War II, like they jumped out of planes, like they had a huge hand and with the 82nd and then the invasion. I was like, man, who wouldn't want to go to an airborne unit? But little did I know that the 101st is not an airborne unit. It is an air assault unit, which was transformed. Another reason they renamed Fort Benning to Fort Moore was Colonel Hal Moore. If you've ever seen We Were Soldiers, that depicted that unit, the 1st Cav unit, and they did a lot of their training at Fort Benning. So at that point, the 101st was redesignated as an air assault unit, especially through the Vietnam conflict. And so I showed up expecting to go to airborne school and jump out of planes, and nope, I was assigned to an air assault unit. So it was another disappointment. But then I found a unit called a Long Range Reconnaissance Detachment, LRSD, and they actually had people that would send a couple of recruits down to the in-processing barracks, and they asked, "Hey, anybody want to go to airborne school, Ranger school, and Pathfinder school? Come join us. We're a small unit. We have a tryout." So I was like, "Man, that'll be awesome." It was 2 weeks of hell, getting my butt smoked, just punishment for 2 weeks just to try out for this unit. And I passed with flying colors, and I just really found my groove. Went to a couple of really great military schools, and then having my taste of small units, we went to Afghanistan. Our mission in Afghanistan in 2009 was small unit reconnaissance, as well as downed aircraft and personnel recovery. So it was just an incredible time. Got a lot of different experience, but I got back from that and I went ahead and threw my hat in the ring. Went to the Special Forces qualifications course. So before that, I had to go to selection, which was like 3 weeks again of hell. You're getting your butt punished. Before that, I went to Ranger School, which is like 3 months of hell. I was like, man, my life is just miserable. I was sucking. And so, yeah, we I went through a year and a half of qualifications just to earn my Green Beret. And in the summer of 2011, earned my Green Beret, got stationed with 7th Special Forces Group on Operational Detachment ODA, Operational Detachment Alpha 7325, or also named before it was 3 numbers, so it was 785. But it was a dive team. And so I got introduced to the world of combat divers, and I went down to combat dive school in Key West, and it is a smoke fest. It is almost a guarantee that you're going to black out under the water and you're probably going to drown at least once. And there's a huge, and like that school is for special operators. So these are men that have already attained like the pinnacle of their career. Like these are men that are battle hardened. They are alpha males to the T. And we had a washout rate of like 75%. Like these were hard men. And we had guys from Delta Force, Marine, MARSOC, Marine Special Operations Command. We had guys CCTs, PJs, Green Berets, Rangers. And we had a washout rate of about 75% still, even in that school. And so by far the hardest, but the best training that I've ever been through was in Key West, going through combat dive school. So that was sort of an overview of my military career. I've been to Iraq multiple times, Afghanistan multiple times. I've been to Egypt, Colombia multiple times, all through my career, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad in 2008. And this was in my transition from the 101st to Fort Bragg. And I said, man, I want to learn how to invest in real estate. And I'll do this on the side, right? It's going to be a side hustle. And so I thought, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And then I read another book by, oh man, I can't remember his name. It's called Millionaire Next Door. But I'm going to put some paint, carpet. I'm going to make $1 million. That didn't work out. I think I did 2 wholesale deals, and I didn't like the wholesaling space. And so I was sort of still trying to figure my way around, like, where do I want to focus in? Again, I was focused on the strategy and the sub asset class. That's all I knew. Like, that's what my focus was on. And I get out to Fort Bragg, going through this qualifications course, and there's a few stages, phases, they call them, where it's more like a gentleman's course. You have the evenings off, you have the weekends off, a lot of classwork, like when you're going through language school, which my language was Spanish. So it was like easy. Like there was no hard, you woke up and did PT, but there was no really hard physical or mental aspect to that regard. And so I would go to these local real estate clubs in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and there would be this guy at the back of the room. He was an older gentleman, and he would say, any of you real estate investors that need money for your projects, come talk to me. I'm a private lender. Well, who doesn't want to know the private lender? So I get in line with everybody else in the room, get back there, and I had a lot more arrogance and a lot more Spitfire and vinegar in me than I have now. Maybe not the Spitfire and vinegar, but definitely a lot less arrogance than I had back then. So I get up there and introduce myself. I shake his hand. I said, my name's Edwin Epperson. I'm training to become a Green Beret. And basically, my attitude was, there's nobody else in this room you need to lend to. Just invest with me. And so he heard me out and he said, well, Mr. Epperson, I appreciate what you're doing for your country and what you're doing for your family, but I wouldn't loan you money if you're the last person on earth. And I sat there and I was like, and that was pretty bold for him, but right. I think he clearly had an end goal to help correct my viewpoint. Yeah. And thank God I had just enough humility to ask him, well, why not? And he said, first off, there's 3 things that you need to be successful in life. You need to have the knowledge, the time, and the experience. And right now, you don't have the time to gain the knowledge, much less even the more time to put that knowledge to work to gain the experience. And it's for those reasons that I wouldn't loan you money. I said, okay, all right, I can accept that. And so over the next couple of months when I was able to attend, I would talk to him because this guy was clear. He knew his stuff. Like this guy knew, like he was the guy in the room that everybody came to. Like, people looked up to him. Like, there was this level of authority that he had that I had not seen in the real estate space. And he wasn't braggadocious about it. He wasn't arrogant. He was a very humble man. And so we got to talking, and he asked me a question that radically, I mean, it's shaped my life up to this point. He said, "Have you ever considered investing like the bank?" And I said, "No, that's a novel idea. I didn't come from money. I'm not a trust fund baby. My mom worked at a church as a women's in the women's ministry department, and my dad was a restaurateur, hardworking. We never really wanted for anything in life. However, we also did not. We never vacationed. We never went anywhere. So it was, a good life, but it wasn't the typical American dream, if you will." And so he said, "Don't worry about the money. If you will learn how to find quality deals, learn how to process, underwrite, mitigate your risk, people with money will come and want to work with you. That's a given. So don't worry about the money. Focus on creating safer investments." I said, okay. So he introduced me to 6, I guess, for lack of a better word, mentors. I've had people tell me, "Oh, these were mentors in your life." And I never really considered that. I considered it a blessing that I met them, or he introduced me to them. But they would get on Skype calls. Zoom wasn't a big thing back then, so it was Skype. And I would sit in with these 6 private lenders all across the United States. They were small. They were lending in their local economy, so there was no conflict of interest or nothing like that. But there's 2 gentlemen in California, a gentleman in Colorado, husband and wife down in Texas, and a gentleman in Alabama. And they would get on and talk about the deals they were underwriting, how they were mitigating risk, issues that were arising, all these things. And then after a couple of sessions that I was on, they would start asking me, "So Ed, what are the laws for lending? Can you do a loan? Do you need a license? What type of borrowers are you going to lend to? What type of projects are you going to lend to? Show us in the law where if you got approached by an attorney or a judge that says what you're doing is illegal, like, can you defend? And do you know that what you're doing is legal?" And so they forced me to do the research, which was interesting because I was never that type of guy. So now here I am implementing skills that I probably should have learned and implemented back in high school and even in my brief college life. But now I was doing it, and it was easy for me because I had a passion for it. I said, this is something I want to do. And so for 4 years I studied. And in this space, when, especially as entrepreneurs, we think that we've got, man, don't wait, like, just keep pushing action, action, action. And there's something to be said about approaching business decisions, especially when we're talking massive business decisions that are going to affect your life, affect the life of your family, affect the life of the vision that you have. Of patience is actually a virtue, and it is a tremendous virtue. And so for 4 years I studied, and I tell people all the time, don't knock the time don't think that you're wasting time by not taking action in the sense that action to where other people can see that you're taking action. If you're not taking that action, definitely be taking action of educating yourself, learning, networking, building that network, surrounding yourself with mentors, people that are pouring into your life to help you reach that actionable step in your business to where now everybody else can see what you're doing. And so study for 4 years. At this time, I was obviously going through the Green Beret training. And then when I got into it as a Green Beret, my focus was really operations, and it's very, very intensive. Like, if you're an operator on an ODA, I mean, it is 110% of your life is dedicated. It's a very hard life. As I mentioned earlier, I was married. I had 2 boys, and that life broke that marriage. There were a lot of personal decisions that I made that broke that marriage, a lot of sin that was in my life, that I had violated my covenant, my vows with my wife, and just a lot of things. So it wasn't just the military. It was a lot of more personal decisions than the military. But so we had gotten a divorce. I was deep. I thought I was going to be in. I was going to be a 20-year, like, my goal, and my team sergeant, my commander, everybody was like, "Ed, you're going to make sergeant major. You definitely need to stay in." And in 2014, my last deployment to Afghanistan, we were deployed to Shawalikot, district of Kandahar. We were doing a lot of operations. So we were running operations at night, come back, get a couple hours of rest, prepare for the next operation. And in between that preparation, when I had downtime, Had a gentleman reach out to me because I was going to a real estate club in Pensacola, Florida. So we were stationed, seventh group was stationed down in Eglin. And I was going to a club in Pensacola, Florida, and I was doing the same thing that the gentleman that I had met many years before had done. And so I was like, I'm a private lender. If anybody needs money, come talk to me. I had no money. I didn't know if somebody did say, hey, I need a loan. Where in the world am I going to get that money?
Deals, yeah. Trusting that the money will come if you can find the deal.
Right. That's what I believed. I was like, I trust that this is going to be the process. And so a gentleman reached out to me via email. He didn't know I had deployed. But he reached out to me via email on the side of a mountain in Afghanistan. He said, hey, I've got a deal. Will you fund it? I said, yeah. And by this point, I had already created my underwriting guidelines. I knew my processes. And so I sent an email to the title company, ordered title. I sent an email to an appraiser, ordered an appraisal, inspectors, my real estate attorney, ordered the loan binder, the documents, real estate attorney reviewed all the documents from the title. And 2 weeks later, I made a loan. And at that moment, I had this epiphany of, man, like if I could do this in Afghanistan while in combat, like I could literally do this anywhere. This is crazy. And so I'm sure some people's questions are like, well, how did you do the loan if you didn't have any money? And so there are a couple of friends. We did a fractional note. I had an uncle that put in about 60,000. It was a small loan. It was 110,000. Had an uncle that put in 60,000. I had 15,000, and I had a couple of military buddies that were sitting on some money. And so I put together a fractional note, and we were all part owners. I collected what I later learned was a yield spread. So I paid my investors at the time was like 7.5%. I was charging the borrower like 11.5%. So on their money, my money, I made the 11.5%, my 15,000. I earned 11.5%. But on their money, I made like a 4.5% yield spread on their money. And I was like, this is crazy. And so, yeah, I'll get back. And my wife now, but my girlfriend at the time, she was on a Skype call with me, and our little bitty compound, we had a little bitty compound. We weren't in a big base, and we got attacked, mortars, RPGs, and machine guns. So we were under attack in the middle of our Skype call. So she hears these deafening boom, boom, boom. Dust is falling, lights are flickering, and one of the mortars hit our SATCOM antenna and destroyed it. So immediately everything goes out on her end. And so we neutralized the threat. We secured the area, secured our base, secured the perimeter. And then we had to call in a replacement satellite. So they flew that out. And my primary job as a Green Beret was, after kicking in doors and neutralizing threats, was for communications. So that was my job. So I got SATCOM back up, and I immediately called my girlfriend, and her face was puffy red. Eyes were super red. I mean, for 10 hours, she thought I was done, and she had nothing. And so after that, she said, if there is anything that you can do outside of the military, I don't care if we live under a bridge in a cardboard box. I am with you, but you've got to get out. Huh. And really at that time in my life, I really felt that God was leading me out. I always believed that God had led me into the military for such a time as this. And then when it was his timing, I would be led out of the military. And I saw this door, and the door was wide open. And so we got out. I got out in the military in 2015 after we got back from Afghanistan in the summer of 14. So from the summer of 14 all the way to October of 2015, I made another 21 loans, deployed about $3 million. And I had found my groove. I knew exactly I could take what I learned in the military and apply it to this business. And then that, of course, you start, again, it's all about your network. It's about continuing your education. You are never there. You've never arrived. It's always about improving. And I actually fell in love with educating myself. And so I learned about fund creation, management of capital, understanding the capital stack, like everything that I teach now. It is information that I've learned firsthand through my journey, if you will.
Well, man, holy cow, you've lived multiple lives. And I think we could unpack that for hours, just the stories and the experiences. One, thank you for your service. I mean, volunteering back in 01 and the patriotism, it's still there, but we need more of it today. So yeah. One, thank you for that. But I think, man, I got 100 questions that come from your story and your journey, but one that I think is unique to you compared to other guests we've had on is the mindset. And you alluded to it a little bit in the fact that if you can do a loan on the side of the mountain, if you can do a guy who hates high school, hated college, jumped in, started learning by doing it, you shared that if I can do this from the side of the mountain, what can't I do? And
Yeah.
so talk a little bit about the mindset, one that you've had to grow and learn through your journey, but maybe the mindset, somebody who's sitting, maybe listening, or somebody who wants to jump in and doesn't know how, or has never been willing to take a chance. I think you have to mentally get yourself to that point. So what did that look like for you?
So your journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step, right? So I would say that from the very first entry into the military, one of the things that the military taught me was grit and determination, what we called stick-to-itiveness. So for me, quitting was absolutely not an option. If I began something, I would not quit. Like, my approach was, I will literally have to be, either somebody else will have to come to me and kick me out, or I'm going to die. Like, that was really, and I hate to be, I don't want to sound dark or gruesome, but that was my mindset. Now, that was trained, like, that was imputed into me over many different trainings. And the training that I went through in the military, I went through Ranger School, as I mentioned, super hard, 3 months of hell. I went through the small 2-week selection to get into the LRSD. I went through several very hard military schools, such as Pathfinder, which is not a physically hard school, but it is a very mental school. It is very, very mental. Then I went through selection, which is another 2 to 3 weeks, depends on how they're doing. And selection is you are getting selected to go into the special forces. In my selection class, we started with 421 students. 140 made it to the end. So those were students that had made 2 weeks. Like, people were dropping out like flies. 140 made it to the end. Out of that 140, only 41 were selected. So you could make it through 2 weeks of hell and still not even get selected. And so there was just this determination to continue to push forward, no matter there. The ability to be comfortable with uncomfortableness, if that's a word, is an absolute must. If you're an entrepreneur, you have to be comfortable with the fact you're driving a car that is embarrassing. You have to be comfortable with the fact that you're living in a place that, you might be embarrassed to show your mom and dad. You will have to be uncomfortable with the fact of you're eating ramen noodles and beans every day for months on end. You have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. One of the biggest factors for me in that, and really solidifying, was actually going to dive school. I had to be uncomfortable with the fact of being underwater, no air to breathe in, and blacking out to accomplish the task. That was literally like, and you had faith that the instructors, they had everything around necessary to take care of you. But the expectation was you were to accomplish the task before you, no matter what, even if that means you pass out underwater, and that will take care of you. So there was that, man, I had to really become comfortable with being uncomfortable. And then once you get to that stage where you are comfortable being uncomfortable, life becomes a lot easier. And you're not focused so much on what other people say, what other people think. You have your lane, you have your mission, and you are driving towards that. And again, like in the entrepreneurial life, we may not have, like, I don't have the same type of, I don't have the dive soups or dive supervisors like watching me, but I do have mentors around me. I have people that I can turn to and say, hey, am I looking at this correctly? Am I approaching this problem correctly? Is a solution that I'm presenting in my mind to myself and eventually to my investors, does this make sense? So if you are not surrounding yourself, if you think you are a man on a lone island, you will be bound to fail. And that was probably, even in the military, even in your top tier units, nothing is a lone wolf operation. Nothing is a lone wolf operation. And if you are an entrepreneur and you're thinking you're going to go about and build a successful company by yourself, you're wrong. You're absolutely dead wrong. You may think in your pride and arrogance that you have, But anybody else looking around on the outside would say, well, you had this person to help you, had this person to hold you accountable, you had this person to pour into you. And so, yeah, I would say that would be one of the things is be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Have that grit determination that you're going to do absolutely whatever is necessary to be successful. And then surround yourself with mentors, people that will pour into you and guide you on that path to help you make right decisions.
That's a really good word. And I mean, I can definitely, thinking about your military experience and training, I mean, it sounds like getting comfortable being uncomfortable was kind of the air you breathed for many, many years and prepared you well. And I think that for a lot of civilians, especially for younger generations, I mean, life is so much about, preserving your comfort, being as comfortable as you possibly can. And so that's a really good message, especially to young entrepreneurs, of that like, hey, it's going to be uncomfortable. Don't expect that you're just going to show up at your first investor meeting and be handed the $1 million to go out
Oh,
and
yeah.
invest, and you get to take half of that to buy yourself a new house and a new car.
Right.
Which is kind of the Instagram, TikTok message to a lot of young investors. So this is really sobering. One of the other things that you shared in your story that was really impressive, and I think a good counterbalance to a lot of the advice that's out there today, is being patient. And I'd love to unpack that a bit more. I think it's easy to hear, like, you waited 4 years in terms of getting education, learning, talking with mentors before you actually did a deal. And in hindsight, I'm sure that 4 years doesn't feel that long, but in the moment, 4 years can feel like forever when you're waiting to do your first deal. And so maybe just unpack that a little bit further. What that looked like, how you wrestled with. Did you feel like you were dragging your feet at all? What were kind of some of the metrics that you were looking for as far as knowing whether or not you were ready? And how would you encourage, somebody who's early on thinking through, okay, am I just being scared and not jumping, or am I being wise in being patient?
Man, that is a really good question, Nick. And I have to be honest, I don't know if there's ever a clear line of delineation that says, okay, now you're being fearful and the opportunity presents itself compared to, okay, I'm being wise and patient. That is a very convoluted, it's a very gray area. And that gray area is pretty wide, right? It's not a very narrow, it's pretty wide. So you could find yourself anywhere in there at any moment. I would say I would contribute that a large part of me waiting 4 years probably was that fear of, am I doing this right? Like, am I making wise decisions? Am I adequately and accurately assessing the risk and putting in risk mitigation procedures? A lot of that falls back to your training. So we have this saying in the military, especially in special operations, in the moment of all hell breaks loose, you always fall back to your base level of training. That's what you will fall back to. So you train as you fight, and so that's the attitude: is you always train as you fight. You never take the easy route. You never take we're not going to sweat too much today. We're not going to put any effort. No, it's like full balls to the wall, excuse the euphemism, guns blazing at 100% of the time. And so in the world of the entrepreneur, how does that convey over? How does that transfer? I would say that a large part of it, again, is your education, how you're educating yourself. A large part of it is your mentors, who you're surrounding yourself with. You need to have people behind you that are not just yes people, but people that will challenge your thought processes, that will challenge the way that you're looking at things, and also push you to take that next step. No matter what, even in one of the very first schools I ever went to was an airborne school. You're jumping out of a plane. That is not a natural thing that people do. People don't just get onto a plane like, oh, you know what? I want to jump out of this thing at 10,000 feet, right? Or actually an airborne school is like 1,500 to 2,000 feet, but nobody does that. And especially when you're standing at the door and you see the earth and everything going by and the plane's doing 110 knots in the air, it's just like, it's not a natural reaction. And so you have jump masters who are there instructing and guiding, But in the case necessary, when you're standing at the door and you're blocking, because in airborne school, you have this limited time that you have to get everybody out of the door so that they can all get on the ground, secure the objective, and then move on with the mission. If you have somebody that in the moment and the door, they're standing there, they're looking out and they freeze, you could actually hold up everybody behind you. And so these jump masters are there for, besides safety and organization, they are there for a third purpose, and that is to ensure that everybody leaves the plane. So in airborne school, we had a guy, he gets there and he's got his lanyard, he's got his hand on his reserve parachute, and his right foot is forward, and it's like he can't take that step to take that left foot over the door, over that threshold, and jump out. And the jump master's like, he's right next to his face, and he says, "Go, go." And they'd say it 3 times. Go. The green light's green. We're all standing like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And that instructor reaches up, grabs a bar, swings back, and donkey kicks him right out the back and right out the plane. Everybody was leaving that plane. And then, of course, everybody behind that dude was like, I'm not getting kicked out of this plane. So after that, it was like everybody's bam, 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 right out the door. So I say that because we can struggle with that. Is this the right time? Is the light really green? Am I really prepared? Do I have the right training? And it really boils down to, if you have not been diligent in training yourself in the education, training yourself in your processes or your systems that you're implementing in your business, and doing it yourself. I think there's so much, and you mentioned this, Nick, there's so much bad advice out there to where, and I teach this, like, leverage other people's time, knowledge, and experience. That if you're going to be in especially on the lending side, thinking, analyzing, and investing like the banks do, it's all about leverage, not just leverage of money, but leverage of time, knowledge, and experience. But even then, you have to have somebody there that's saying, go, like, you're ready, go. And so that's why we cannot as entrepreneurs be on an island by ourselves. We have to have, and if the entrepreneur is not focused on building a board of advisors, for lack of a better word, board of advisors around you that can hold you back, encourage you, hold up, now let's look at this a little bit longer, let's look at this a little bit slower, or at that moment to where, hey, it's ready, go. If you're not intentional about surrounding yourself with people like that, then you will struggle with, am I ready? And I see this all the time, especially in the real estate space. Have investors that go through the training, they go through a course, they're going to real estate clubs, they're getting all this knowledge, but knowledge is not going to be that factor that pushes you out the door, right? It's not going to be knowledge, it's going to be action. And so there's so much time to where, you've got enough knowledge. Now it's about making that decision. And, I have to be honest, Nick, there's not a magic formula. It's really an internal ability. And if you don't have that ability, it can be trained. It's not something that you're born with. It can be trained. But if you're not willing to train yourself, to be honest, you're probably not well suited as an entrepreneur. Go work for somebody and help them build a successful company. But I'm very frank with that. Not everybody is geared to be an entrepreneur. It sounds great. It looks sexy on Instagram and TikTok and all these social media posts where they're driving a nice car and they've got freedom of time. Let me tell you, being an entrepreneur is not freedom of time. That is the biggest lie out there. If you're building a company, you do not have freedom of anything. So, that would be my encouragement as well as exhortation to young entrepreneurs is, don't get caught up in the TikTok lifestyle. Don't get caught up in the Instagram photos. Be diligent about gaining the knowledge. Be diligent about surrounding yourself, and then train yourself to take action. Train yourself to take that step even when you're at a 75% solution. You're never going to be at 100%. And if you're waiting for that 100%, opportunities are going to pass you by, and you're going to look down 10 years, 20 years later and think, man, how much did I miss out on? So there has to be that time that you take that step out the door. Just make sure that you've surrounded yourself with the right mentors, the right people that will help ensure that you're making as best a decision as possible.
Or donkey kick you out the door if
really
out the door.
Oh man, that's so helpful. And I think just the nuggets of wisdom. It's funny because I'm looking at my questions we typically ask, both with bogus advice and secret sauce to being an entrepreneur. And I think you hit both of them just there. So that I wouldn't say it any better way and ask anything more there. Edwin, let's transition here just a little bit to today and what you're doing, the fund. We talked a little bit about it early on, but I'm curious for you, who are you looking for in terms of investors? How are you looking to steward and serve them and manage their money well? What makes I mean, what gets you excited? On top of that, maybe what do you feel like you have to offer? This is kind of an opportunity, I think, just to pitch what you're doing and for our audience who may be interested in doing something similar or maybe partnering with you. So talk a little there.
Well, thank you for that. I am huge about education. I love the educational space. I love teaching, training, coming alongside of investors and helping them see not every investor is suited to invest in real estate. So don't I do believe in diversification. I believe that you should have, and let me be clear. There's two types of investors. You have an active investor and you have a passive investor. The problem with real estate is that it holds out the allure of passive income or passive investing. However, if you are actively involved, it's not a passive investment, right? So unlike stocks, like when you invest in a stock, you're not going out to actually run a company to create an IPO in like Elon Musk or Bill Gates or any of these large, massive companies, right? You're just simply buying stocks and then you ride the market. In the same way in real estate, you have active investors and passive investors. And I think it's really critical that investors understand which side of the aisle they want to play in. So do you want to be an active investor or do you want to be passive? If you're passive, then you need to identify those, for lack of a better word, sponsors or managers that you can invest by, with, and through, which is a Green Beret phraseology. By, with, and through to be successful, and so that you can have the freedom of your time and to pursue the things that you want to pursue. There are other investors that are looking for a career change, like I was. Well, don't be a passive investor if that's what your goal is. Like you want to be an active investor. So start learning the capital stack first, which side you want to play on. Identify the market, whether it's real estate, whether it's stocks, crypto, whether it's building a business. Identify the market. Identify your asset, your primary asset category under that, your sub asset, and then identify your strategy. Then you can step in and now you can be very hyper focused on what's the education and the training that I need to acquire and plugging yourself in with the right mentors and groups. So for passive investors, that's who I'm looking for. So in our fund, I raise capital from investors that don't have the time, the knowledge, or the experience. I'm adamant about repeating that because too many times people think that they have to have the time, knowledge, and experience in adequate supply before they can even passively invest. And that's not the case. What you're really doing is you are investing in the jockey, not the horse. So you want to identify those managers, those sponsors that are in the space that you want to be invested in, and they are knowledgeable. They've been through the fire. I cannot speak enough about this. They have experienced loss. They've experienced deals go south. I have had my fair share. One of the biggest lessons, I'm actually doing a mini course right now with a very select group of people teaching transactional funding. And one of the very first loans that I ever had go bad was a transactional deal. We were scammed out of $340,000. And then we put in another $52,000 in pursuing this borrower in civil litigation. At the end of the day, they had nothing and we got nothing. So $500,000 plus down the drain, gone, vanished, unsecured. And that in the class, I'm going through and teaching them how to adequately look at investment opportunities as an active investor. But ultimately, what that does is it really separates somebody's mind. Like I don't want to be in that position. Like I want to find somebody that I can just they've been through the fire. I want to invest by, with, and through them. So ultimately through that class, I'm sure I'm going to have some investors that, you know what, I don't want to do this as a job. Like I'm okay investing in someone else. And then hopefully, I've built that again, because of the knowledge, the education that I am passionate about. They will see me as somebody that is knowledgeable, that I have built that trust, not only in my previous background, in my previous life, but also the fires that I've walked through in the current job. So my ideal investor, avatar investor, right, is somebody who is they've got a business, they're sitting on money, they don't know what to do with it, they're not necessarily comfortable having in the stock market, and they're looking for a passive way to invest. One of the things that makes my fund different than other funds, speaking in the debt space, is that we're not a blind pool fund. So what I do is my management company actually makes the loans. So we actually go out, we create the investment, and we invest 100% of my capital into these loans first. After that loan is made, we then make it available to the fund investors. So the fund investors, they have their own portal, they log in. It's almost like, have you ever heard of Cadre or any one of these crowdfunding sources where you log in and then you can, I want to buy a little bit. We do the same thing on our fund. So you have the ability to invest in debt. You know exactly which property your money is secured to. You get updates on that property as it makes progress. You get monthly payments. And then at the end, you get your principal back. You've earned your interest. And then because we have that fractional ability, so when we make the loan, the investor in the fund can say, well, I want to put $1,000 here or $5,000 here or here. And as you're earning interest, you can actually redeploy that interest into additional loans. So it creates that unique opportunity that is very rare in the space of earning compounding interest on your interest, right? The other thing that's unique about the fund is it's not just debt. We also offer equity investments. So we do joint ventures. We invest in syndications, which we're buying apartments or commercial properties, whatever that looks like. And so the investors can fractionally participate in an equity position. And so there's a lot of nuances that makes my fund different than a lot of other funds. I am excited, which is probably, again, going to the gruesome aspect. In the military, we have dark humor. It's the way you can survive when you've lost buddies in operations, and then you come back, you're reset, and then 24 hours later, you're expected to get back out there and continue operations. You have to have a way to deal with that. And for a lot of us, it's dark humor. And so it can be very off-putting for the civilian population, but it's not that we're disrespectful of life or that we don't have we don't hold life in value. It's just our way of dealing with those tragic circumstances. But one of the things that I am expecting is, and I'm sure many of your listeners have invested or are considering investing in a syndication, which is a syndication, again, is a sponsor is saying, hey, we're going to buy this apartment building. We're going to buy this office space. We're going to buy some big project. We don't have the money necessary. We're going to get a loan from a bank. So let's say it's a $10 million purchase. We're going to get a loan from a bank for $7 million. We need $3 million as a down payment, and then maybe another $1 million in operational OPEX, as well as maybe improvement costs. So they're going to go out and raise $4 million. The problem in the space of real estate, you have sponsors, also called GPs, that are going out there saying, and I actually, it lights a fire under my butt when I hear this, because it's a lie. They say your money is secured to real estate. No, it's not. It is backed by real estate. When you invest in a syndication, when you invest in equity, it is backed by that real estate. The only secured position in real estate is debt. You are secured because you have a mortgage or a deed of trust recorded. That's the only security. If you are investing in equity, you are not secured. You're backed. Now, your investment is backed. You are part owner of that asset, but you're not secured to the asset. And what we have going on right now in the commercial multifamily space, I'm sure if anybody follows anything on social media at all, you have seen the reports of these big office spaces, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Austin, Texas, even here in Florida, where you've got these, New York for sure, Chicago, these massive office space buildings, 60,000 square foot, 1 million square foot, that, a few years ago were being sold at $300, $400 a square foot. Now they're being sold for $12 a square foot, $15 a square foot. Like the tsunami of deals that are going south are going to rock a lot of people's world. And there are a lot of investors that, because they think they're and people assume because you're a passive investor investing in a passive investment, which is what syndications hold themselves out to be, that it is a safer investment. It's a more secure investment. And that's why I am passionate about teaching. You need to understand the capital stack. That is where everything begins. If you do not understand the difference between debt and equity investments and the inherent risk that come with each one of those, you are going to be investing in primarily equity, because that's what everybody talks about. And you have the misconception that you are safe and secured, like you would only be in debt, but you're not, because you're in equity. You have the higher promise of potential returns, but that also comes with a lot of risk. And so my expectation is in the next couple of quarters, fully, I would say the the other shoe will have completely dropped in the commercial and multifamily space by Q2 of 2025. You've got, and we could dive into all the nuances of why I believe that is the case, but there are a lot of indicators that would indicate it could happen sooner. For the sake of a lot of investors, I hope that it doesn't. But it could happen sooner. But from mid 25 all the way through probably the end of 26 or even longer, we are going to be in a complete free fall in the commercial multifamily space. And there are a lot of investors, unfortunately, that have invested into syndications, and they think that they're secured. They think that they are in a safer investment. And in reality, they are the most exposed investor out there. Like, their investment is completely exposed to risk. It's like being on an operation and you're pulling security and you think your buddy has your six. A firefight breaks out. You turn around and there's nobody there. That is the absolute worst feeling in the world. And that's happening, it's currently happening, and it will be happening to a lot of investors that have invested in syndications. So I see that, and I say that like that's the dark side coming out, but there is going to be tremendous opportunity for those who have been patient, who have stood back. They're looking at what's happening. They're like, okay, I want to find an operator. I want to find somebody that I can invest by, with, and through to take advantage of what's coming, because is the economy in the United States, are we becoming, is it Venezuela or Cuba right now? No, it's not. We have a lot of laws in the books which make our country unique. We can't just have somebody come in and dictatorial, like erase everything. Could it happen? I guess, there's nothing that is out of the bounds, but historically speaking, and just the way our country has been created and founded, we have laws on the books. So real estate is not going anywhere, and there will be a rise and a fall, as all markets have cycles. So I see we're in the fall. In the next couple of years, we're going to be at the bottom, especially in the multifamily commercial space. And there is going to be tremendous opportunity for those who have been wise, that have been patient, that have been properly educated in understanding these categories of investing.
Sobering, man. And I appreciate the education on both sides. I mean, it's helpful for our listeners, even for Nick and I, as we think about different opportunities, syndications to look at, as well as, again, just the virtue of patience and really being able to take a look at, okay, where we're at. And I appreciate the clarification too. I think that you're right. There is a real misconception of like, oh, I'm an owner of this real estate. Real estate never goes to zero. Real estate's the safest asset there is. But making that key distinction between, are you on the equity side or the debt side? Because it's only the debt side that's truly secured. So that's super helpful.
And as you were saying that, the banker in me was giving a hearty here, because banks always are in a first position and always get their money back first.
Man, guys, I tell you what. So there's so much bad knowledge and information being peddled out there at the cost of investors. Yeah. There's an investor here in Tampa, and thankfully he did not act, and he is not acting with bad intent or bad malice. He is acting from a place of ignorance. And so we did a loan with him several years ago. Great. He paid every month. He's a young guy. He's got a big vision. He's buying up these lots to then develop properties, but he was also taking investor capital, which is fine, but he wasn't legally able to do that. He didn't have a filing even with the state. So when you're raising capital, there are several levels. You can do a state filing, which you basically say, hey, I'm filing with the state of Florida or New York or wherever you're at. I'm going to raise X amount of capital. And every state has a sort of a limit, right? I think in Florida, it's $5 million. You can file for the state to raise up to $5 million. And then after that, you actually have to you're required to file with the federal government, the SEC. So he had no filing with either the state or the SEC to raise, but in his mind, he was doing right by the investors. And I believe him because I've worked with him before. He honestly believed that he was doing right because he was giving a promissory note to the investors. It's like, okay, you're investing $100,000. Your money is tied to this property via this promissory note. Now, the promissory note, it had the property address, it had the property legal description, like, in all intents and purposes, I mean, yeah, for somebody who is ignorant of what true security is, that looks like it's like I'm secured. My money is tied. And so over the past couple of years, he's taken investor capital this way. He sold some of the properties that are listed on the notes, and the investors were like, hey, investor, the capital investors were talking to the real estate investor. We believe you. We trust you. We're behind you. You just keep rolling our money over. And so in their mind, their money was earned. And what he promised them was, he was promising them between 25 and 35% annually on their money. There is not an investment out there that makes you 25 to 35% annually. It doesn't exist. And so I attribute that to his ignorance, his desire to really, because he was trying to build a business, so he's trying to take investor capital. He didn't do it the right way. And then honestly, I also attribute it to these capital investors. Some of them were wise, that they know what they're doing, and they saw an ability to take advantage of a real estate investor. So there was wrong done on all sides. So we've come in, and I've been negotiating with him and the capital investors, and I pretty much laid down, like, if I'm going to step in and provide a capital infusion, number one, I'm taking all the collateral. Like, you will collateralize every single asset that you own free and clear, even if it was bought by your investors' capital. All your investors' capital is truly going to equity, which means their capital is going to be tied to a specific asset. And then when you sell that asset, whatever you make, real estate investor, you have to determine with them what percentage of your profit they are going to share in. I and your company will have an agreement as a profit split. So because I'm coming to the table with this money, I'm going to take 40 to 45% of the profit on every deal until I'm paid back. And I have a first position, plain and simple. So I don't think his investors are on board with that. They're like, no. The problem is, over the years, he's tried to placate them, hey, we're doing well. So he's paid interest, he's paid money to them, but it wasn't properly categorized. It wasn't properly accounted for. And to make payments to them, he did not make payments on his taxes. And so what he has is multiple assets that he owns free and clear that have unpaid taxes. And in his mind, it was justified because he wanted to do right by his investors. His intentions were good, but the road to hell is paved with lots of good intentions. And so now he is at risk of losing all of these assets to a tax deed sale because he hasn't paid the taxes. Now, I would challenge anybody who thinks that investing in syndications, hey, we own the asset. No, not really. Even if you own it free and clear, the government still technically owns that because of taxes. And if you don't pay your taxes, guess what? The government can come in and take your property. And then guess what? You have nothing. There's no legal action you can take against the state or the federal government because you didn't pay your taxes. Right or wrong, whatever your thoughts about that, I leave that for individual discussion. But at the end of the day, it is an unsecured investment. And so, yeah, that's the good intentions, bad execution. And unfortunately, a lot of his investors are in a position to where they have to give up the expected returns for something that, in as high a risk position that they should be earning high returns, they're probably going to get very, very minimal returns. And that's just and they have to make that decision. So, yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that story and others that you've shared, because I think, to your point, we often glamorize and talk about all the beauty of real estate and syndication and driving the nice cars, but there is such an underbelly to it as well. And I think we've similarly heard that caution from other guests that we've had on, either deals for themselves that have gone south, or they've watched people crumble. And, and so I think you're right. The right mentors, the right education, patience, those are some of those ingredients to making this pie successful. So
absolutely.
I love that. Well, hey, man, this has been awesome, Edwin. Let's transition. I'm going to say we're going to land the plane. It brings new meaning with you since you've jumped out of planes. But
I would not be on that plane right now. I don't know what plane you guys are on.
Let's jump over to our gold nugget round questions, and okay. I'm going to do something a little different than I have with other guests. We have a couple sets of gold nugget questions. I'm going to kind of merge them together and throw them at you rapid fire, and you hit me with what comes to mind. So, first one here, and I'm curious, reflecting on your story, do you find yourself to being a journey person or a destination person? And how does that impact where you're at today?
I love the journey. I love the destination. You have to have a destination. You have to have a goal, but I love the journey. And I think too many times, and this sort of speaks to the patience aspect, too many times we want to jump forward I just want to get through, this hardship or whatever that is just to get to the destination. And the problem with that is when you get to the destination, you realize that it wasn't at all what you thought it was. It's the journey that gets you there. And along the journey, you're going to find that, oh, wow, there's another destination. There's another destination. And if your goal is just to get to that destination, I just need to get to a valuation of 3x multiplier. I need to get to a valuation of 100 million. And that's all you're working for. You get to the valuation of 100 million. And then it's like, okay, what now? And yeah, you could go and find a different destination, but man, that journey offers growth. It offers maturity. It offers opportunities that you would have otherwise just missed. And so, yes, I am definitely a journey guy.
Love it. What's a quote from a book or mentor that stuck with you along your journey?
So one of the quotes, I've mentioned it earlier, is, do you have the time, the knowledge, or the experience to be successful? Because that's what you need. Another quote that I love because of my banker mindset is, you've heard this saying that he who owns the gold makes the rules. That's patently false. That is patently false. It is the one who controls the gold that makes the rules. Just like the banks control, when you deposit, yeah, it's your gold, but you put it into the bank. Guess what? The bank makes all the terms for when you borrow money from them for a house, for a car, for credit. Doesn't matter. You're playing by their rules and they control your gold. So it's not necessarily a quote from a specific individual, but I've repurposed as, he who controls the gold makes the rules. And it really fits within that banker mindset.
That's good. I haven't heard that one before. I like that. Next one here. Why is it important to have an abundance mindset versus scarcity mindset?
Oh man, Nick, I tell you what, especially coming up in the next couple of months, quarters, and even years, that's going to be a challenging mindset, because people are going to start seeing, the quote proverbial world fall apart around them. And if your mindset is scarcity, then that would indicate that when you see this happening, like, that's the end of the road, like there's nothing else. Whereas an abundant mindset starts to look at the problems that are before us and saying, okay, how can I reposition myself to actually not take advantage of other people, but take advantage of the situation, see where opportunities lie in the absolute worst of circumstances. And again, then that starts to open up the journey for other possibilities, other destinations.
That's good. What advice would you give to your younger self as you're just starting out, if you were just starting out again?
Suck it up and drive on. Like, there was definitely some times to where I was like, oh man, this is just too hard. I can't tell you, like, that first time that I lost losing $340,000 of mine and my investors in capital, and then having to go through that, I was ready to throw in the towel. If you talk to my wife, she will say there were many, like, I'm a grown ass man. I don't cry, right? Like, that's sort of the approach, but especially everything I've been through, like, the only thing that really makes me weep is seeing the love that I have for my wife and my wife has for me, and my love for Jesus Christ. Other than that, I don't, like, there's very few things in life that will make me cry, but man, I tell you what, I was a broken man. And it wasn't so much the loss of the money. It was the fear of the loss of the trust of the investors. And by the way, I had 7 investors in that deal. 5 investors continue to invest with me today. So there's something to be said about your approach to how you manage disappointments and setbacks.
Such good, and learning through the mistakes and the pain and continuing forward. I love that. Pick one of these and how you're focused on growing this year: family, faith, fitness, finance, and future.
I would say, okay, one, I'm going to have to go with family. My wife has struggled with endometriosis. So it's a disease that affects the reproductive organs, and her monthly cycles are excruciatingly painful to the point that she is blacked out. She's in bed for multiple days on end. And so we have a surgery coming up. Finally, we have identified a world-class renowned surgeon. He is a trained the trainer. So he trains other endometriosis surgeons to remove the disease. So we're going to be going down to Miami. We have an appointment with him October 4th. And our prayer and our hope is that after that, she will be on the path to be able to conceive. And so that is our focus for this year.
I love that, man. Prayers and thoughts for you guys as that happens,
Thank
but
you.
hopefully an exciting adventure, once you get past that. All right, I got 2 more for you that I'm going to, then we can land it. What's a dream or goal that you have that you've not been able to make happen yet?
One of our dreams is to go down to Patagonia in Argentina. So the southern tip of Argentina, that's a dream. And it's more for the lack of proper planning and just setting aside the time to do that. But that is definitely a dream of ours.
I like it. I like it. Last one here. At the end of life, what do you hope you'll be remembered for?
My generosity. And really, so I believe that everybody needs to have a higher calling, a higher purpose than just making money or building a company. That's not going to last. When you die, you can't take any of it with you. I mean, we can see that because pharaohs, you have all the gold statues that they had in their tombs. So you're not taking any of this with you. My hope and desire is that I will be remembered as a gospel patron, pushing forward the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, into the outer reaches so that people's hearts and minds are focused and turned towards God. That is my desire.
Man, I love this conversation. You are a remarkable person, and I just, it's been so cool to be able to hear your stories and to hear as well, like how all of your experiences have now informed what it is that you're doing. Like you said, it's been just an incredible journey, really inspiring for both Nick and I and for our listeners. For our listeners that want to connect with you, that want to learn more about the fund, where would you send them? What's the best spots?
Best place to connect with me is on LinkedIn. It's a professional networking site. So I'm not very big. Actually, I got locked out of Facebook. I had the stinking 2-factor authenticator on my phone, got a new phone, and I forgot to transfer over the 2-factor. So, and Facebook, their customer service doesn't exist with them. So I'm literally have not been able to log in, and I've sort of thrown my hands up like, oh, who cares? Yeah. So I'm only on LinkedIn. And so you can look up Edwin D. Epperson III, 3 I's. And you'll find me, or you can go to our website, bluebayfund.com.
Solid. We'll include links to both your LinkedIn page and to your fund page in the show notes. So listeners, do check that out. Also, there's links to the Abundant Journey page where you can check out all of our past resources there. Do be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast. Share it with a friend. Let's get Ed's story out in front of as many other people as possible to inspire entrepreneurship for the good of the world. So, Edwin, man, thank you so much. Really wonderful to connect. Wish you all the best and more success as you move forward. And listeners, we'll be back with you again very soon.
Thank you.